Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. We got some really cool stuff to unpack today, all about how students learn, especially in classrooms. You sent over some super interesting stuff about this, and we thought we should really dive into this idea of scaffolding.
Scaffolding,
Yeah,
yeah.
which I mean, probably a lot of our listeners are familiar with, right? Like at least the basic idea.
Yeah, I think most people have encountered the concept, at least in passing. It's basically the idea that learners need the right support to
Mhm.
tackle those things that they couldn't quite manage on their own.
Right,
Oh,
exactly. It's all about providing that extra support so that you can stretch a little bit further than you could on your own.
yeah.
And, this whole concept really took off thanks to Lev Vygotsky.
Oh, absolutely, Vygotsky.
And his idea of the zone of proximal development, the ZPD. I feel like we probably talked about this before, but for anyone who's tuning in for the first time, can you give us like a quick rundown?
Yeah, so the ZPD, it's kind of like that sweet spot for learning, right? It's not too
Ah,
easy where you're bored. It's not so hard that you just want to give up, but it's that place where you're like right on the edge of getting it.
right.
And with just the right support, you can grasp that new idea or master that skill. Like you're so close to doing it yourself, but you just need that little bit of help to get over the hump.
That's like that little boost, right?
Exactly. And it's temporary. The idea is that you eventually move beyond needing that support.
Mm-hmm. Now, when we think about scaffolding, the classic image is often like that one-on-one tutoring situation, like a
Yeah.
master and apprentice working side by side. And that makes sense, right? But classrooms, as we all know, are not exactly set up for that kind of constant individualized attention.
Right, definitely not.
So how does scaffolding actually work in that kind of environment? Because it's rare that a teacher has the time to give each student that one-on-one guidance all the time.
Well, that's exactly where this idea of distributed scaffolding comes in. And it's something that I think really gets at the complexity of how learning happens in classrooms, especially today.
Right. And we're going to dive deep into this today because you shared this really fascinating article called Distributed Scaffolding. Scaffolding students in classroom environments that looks at exactly that.
Yeah, this paper really gets into how the support you get as a learner doesn't always have to come directly from the teacher. It can come from a whole bunch of places within the classroom.
Okay, so maybe even from other students.
Absolutely, yeah. And from tools and resources that are available in the learning environment.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Before we get into the distributed part, I think it's helpful to make a distinction between scaffolding as that action of providing support and scaffolds as the actual things that are providing that support.
Oh, that's a really important point because sometimes those terms get used interchangeably and it can get a little confusing.
Right. So scaffolding is like the verb, it's the process of supporting, whereas scaffolds are the nouns, the actual tools or structures. And this article really helped me see how, in a classroom setting, those scaffolds can come in all sorts of forms.
Yeah, it's a much broader view than just that classic image of, the teacher standing over the student's shoulder.
Right, exactly. So tell me, how does this idea of distributed scaffolding fit in? How would you define it?
Okay, so distributed scaffolding, it's basically recognizing that the support you get for learning in a classroom isn't only coming from the teacher. Instead, it's spread out or distributed across a network of different things that are available to you in that learning environment.
A network of different things.
Yeah.
Okay, so that could be like the physical layout of the classroom, the materials you're working with, the interactions you have with your classmates, even the technology you're using.
Exactly. It's all of those things working together in concert to provide support for learning.
Got it. So it's like scaffolding is happening on multiple levels, not just from that one-on-one teacher interaction. So can you break down these different sources of support a little more? The article mentioned two main categories, right?
Right. The first category is tools, and this is a pretty broad category. It can include physical objects like those manipulatives you might use in a math class, or those graphic organizers that help you organize your thoughts when you're writing an essay.
I love a good graphic organizer.
Me too. They can be so helpful. But it's not just those hands-on things. It can also be digital resources like educational apps or websites you use for research, simulations, all sorts of things.
Okay, so basically anything that's designed to help guide your learning process can be considered a tool, regardless of whether it's physical or digital.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And the key is that they're intentionally designed to support your learning, to make it easier to grasp those tricky concepts or practice those skills.
And what about the second category? What was that?
So the second category is what they call social scaffolds. And this is all about the support you get from the people around you in the classroom.
Okay, so like the interactions you have with your classmates and with the teacher.
Right. So it could be working together with your classmates on a group project or having those class discussions where you bounce ideas off each other and learn from each other's perspectives.
And it could also be the way the teacher sets up those group activities,
Right.
right? Like making sure that everyone has a role to play and that the activity is structured in a way that promotes collaboration and learning.
Absolutely. And even just something as simple as the teacher asking a really good question that gets everyone thinking and sharing their ideas can be a powerful social scaffold.
So if I'm struggling to understand a concept and a classmate explains it to me in a way that suddenly makes sense, that's a social scaffold in action.
Exactly. Or if the teacher facilitates a debate that encourages you to think critically and consider different viewpoints, that's another example.
Got it. So it's not just about what you're learning, but who you're learning with and how you're interacting with them. Now, the article also mentioned different kinds of ways that these tools and social supports can work together. Can you talk about those a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So just having those different tools and social interactions happening in a classroom doesn't automatically make it distributed scaffolding. It's about how those different elements interact with each other that really matters.
So it's not just about having all the pieces, it's about how they fit together.
Right, exactly. Like you can have the most amazing educational app in the world, but if it's not integrated into the classroom activities in a way that makes sense, it's not going to be that helpful. And the same goes for group work. If the groups aren't structured effectively, or if the teacher isn't facilitating the interactions in a way that promotes learning, it can actually be counterproductive.
It sounds like it takes a lot of careful planning and skillful orchestration on the part of the teacher to make this all work.
Yeah, it definitely does. Teachers have a really important role to play in making sure that all those pieces of the distributed scaffolding system are working together effectively.
So tell me more about these different types of interactions. The article mentioned complementary scaffolds and overlapping scaffolds. What's the difference between those?
Okay, so complementary scaffolds, they're kind of like two sides of the same coin, right? They provide different kinds of support that work together to create a more complete learning experience.
Okay, so give me an example.
Sure. So let's say you're learning how to write a persuasive essay. The teacher might give you a graphic organizer to help you structure your ideas, and then they might pair you up with a classmate to peer review each other's drafts.
Okay, I see. So the graphic organizer is like a tool-based scaffold that helps you with the organization and content, and then the peer review is a social scaffold that gives you feedback on your writing and ideas from a different perspective.
Exactly. And those two things work together, right? Having that structured outline from the graphic organizer can make it easier for your classmate to give you specific and helpful feedback. And that feedback can help you see how well you've actually applied those organizational principles.
Makes sense. So they complement each other, each providing a different piece of the puzzle. What about overlapping scaffolds? What are those like?
So, overlapping scaffolds are when you have multiple sources providing a similar kind of support. At first glance, it might seem redundant, but it can actually be really helpful. It's like having different ways to access the same information.
Okay, so give me an example of that.
Sure, so imagine you're learning about a historical event. The teacher might give a lecture on it, and then you might watch a video that covers the same material, but maybe from a different perspective or with different visual.
Okay, I see. So both the lecture and the video are providing information about the same event, but they're doing it in slightly different ways, and that can actually deepen your understanding.
Yeah, having those multiple perspectives can help solidify your learning and make it more memorable. It's like getting the same message from different sources, which can make it more likely to stick.
And sometimes different people just explain things in ways that click better for you, right?
Mhm.
So if you're in a study group and two of your classmates really understand a concept, you've got two potential sources of help if you get stuck.
Exactly. It's about having options and being able to find the explanation that works best for you. But of course, it's important to make sure that the different explanations are clear and consistent. You don't want to create confusion by presenting conflicting information.
Right, that makes sense. Now, the article also mentioned sequential scaffolds. What's that about?
So sequential scaffolds are kind of like building blocks, right? They provide support in a specific order, each building upon the previous one.
Okay, so it's like a step-by-step process.
Yeah, exactly. So let's say you're working on a science project. First, you might do some individual research using online resources and a worksheet that guides you through gathering information. Then you might work with a partner to share your findings and discuss your initial ideas. And finally, you might present your project to the whole class, incorporating feedback from both your partner and the teacher.
Got it. So each stage of the project provides a different type of scaffold that prepares you for the next stage.
Right. And the support gradually becomes more sophisticated as you move through those stages, building your skills and knowledge along the way.
Now, I'm curious about how the concept of fading plays into this distributed model, because we often think about fading in terms of the teacher gradually withdrawing support. But how does that work when the support is coming from all these different sources?
That's a great question. So, in a distributed model, fading can happen in a few different ways. One way is, as you mentioned, the teacher gradually stepping back and giving students more autonomy. So instead of directly telling students what to do, the teacher might start by asking guiding questions or providing hints, and then eventually let the students take the lead entirely.
Okay, so it's like the teacher slowly handing over the reins.
Exactly. But feeding can also happen within the tools themselves. For example, an educational app might start out by giving very explicit instructions and then gradually reduce the amount of guidance it provides as the student progresses.
So it's like the training wheels are coming off as you get more proficient.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. And with social scaffolds, fading might involve the teacher gradually giving less structure to group activities or discussions, allowing the students to take more ownership and figure things out for themselves.
So as we become more confident and competent, we need less and less of those external supports, whether they're coming from the teacher, our peers, or the tools we're using. It's all about that gradual transfer of responsibility.
Exactly. And that transfer of responsibility is really the ultimate goal of scaffolding, right? We want students to eventually be able to learn and problem solve independently without needing constant hand-holding.
And distributed scaffolding is really all about setting the stage for that to happen, providing the support structures necessary for students to eventually stand on their own 2 feet.
Exactly. And I think what's really exciting about this perspective is that it helps us see learning as this dynamic and collaborative process
Yeah.
where support can come from all sorts of different places.
Right. It's not just about the teacher pouring knowledge into the students' heads. It's about creating a rich and supportive ecosystem where learning can flourish.
And I think that's a really powerful idea, both for educators and for anyone who's interested in how we learn and grow.
So, for all the teachers listening out there, what are some of the key takeaways they can apply in their own classrooms?
Well, one of the biggest takeaways is that thinking about distributed scaffolding can help them be more intentional about how they design their learning environments. It's about carefully considering all the different sources of support that are available, the tools, the social interactions, the physical space, and making sure they're all working together in a way that supports student learning. It's about thinking about how they can structure activities to promote collaboration and peer learning, how they can fade their own support over time, and how they can use technology effectively to enhance learning rather than distract from it.
So it's a lot more than just delivering content. It's about creating those opportunities for students to interact with each other, with the material and with the teacher in a way that really deepens their understanding.
Yeah, exactly. It's about creating a culture of learning in the classroom where support is embedded in every aspect of the learning experience. Now, even seemingly simple things like how desks are arranged or having consistent routines can be part of a distributed scaffolding system. For example, having designated areas for group work or a predictable structure for peer review can make those interactions smoother and more effective.
That's interesting. It sounds like you don't necessarily need fancy technology or elaborate setups for distributed scaffolding to be happening. Even well-established classroom practices can contribute to this idea of distributed support.
Absolutely. Of course, technology can definitely play a valuable role in distributed scaffolding too. Think about those collaborative online platforms that allow students to work together on projects or give each other feedback. Or even intelligent tutoring systems that can adapt to students' individual needs and provide personalized support.
Right, the possibilities are pretty much endless. But like you said earlier, it's all about using technology in a purposeful way, making sure that it's truly enhancing the learning experience and not just adding another layer of complexity.
Exactly. The key takeaway here is that learning in classrooms is rarely a solo endeavor. It's a collaborative process that involves a whole network of supports, teachers, peers, tools, and even the physical environment, all working together to help students succeed.
And by understanding how these different sources of support interact and how they can be intentionally designed and orchestrated, we can create much richer and more effective learning experiences for all students.
And for you listening, think back to a time when you learned something really complex or challenging. What were the different supports that helped you along the way? Were there any specific tools that made a difference? Did you have anyone who guided you or gave you feedback? How did those supports change as you progressed? By looking back on your own learning journey through this lens of distributed scaffolding, you might gain some interesting insights into how you learn best and what kinds of supports are most helpful for you.
This idea of distributed scaffolding really gives us a much more nuanced and I think more realistic picture of how learning actually happens in classrooms and so many other areas of life. It's about recognizing that learning is rarely a linear process, it's messy and dynamic, and it involves a whole ecosystem of supports. And by embracing this complexity, we can create learning environments that are more engaging, more supportive, and ultimately more effective for all learners. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll catch you next time.
Until next time.